The SIZZLE top starts out by hanging the trim that we made in tuck lace to create a hem. In order to get to this point, you should have already finished with movies 1 and 2. 1 was an introduction and overview of the design and yarn requirements, gauge, and all of that. And 2 explained how to knit that trim. So if you haven't done it yet, you'll want to go back and review those. If you have bought the written pattern from Ravelry, and if you want it, there is a link in the program notes, you will have this diagram, and we will begin here. We will hang every other row of the knitted trim on one of the working needles on the main bed, or if you're not using a ribber, just the bed of the machine. This is how the trim will look on the finished garment. Note that the right side of the garment, the public side, is the knit side of the fabric, while the right side of the trim is the purl side. As we knit, the purl side is the one we're looking at. The knit side is away from us. So to get the purl side of the trim aligning with the knit side of the main fabric, we'll hang the trim with the purl side away from us and the knit side in view. What we need to see now shows more easily from the purl side, so I'm going to show it to you and then you'll be able to do it correctly with the fabric turned away from you. See those bumps? That occurs every other row on machine knitted fabric. We call those the knots. These smoother strands also occur every other row, alternating with the knots. We call them the bars. For this trim, we'll hang the bars. Here is what it would look like if we were hanging it so that the purl side was facing us. But if we did that, the purl side would be facing away and the knit side would be out when we finish the garment, and that's not really what we want this time. If hanging the edge of knitted fabric is new to you, however, you might like to try it for a few stitches with the purl side in view to get used to looking at it, and that will make it easier for you to turn it around and find the same place on the fabric. I suggest that you do something slightly different than what I'm showing you, and that is start with your yarn markers in the very center of the bed. Either stitch 1 left or 1 right of 0, matching up to the marker, and then do what I'm doing, but work to the left and the right. That way you will make sure of having the excess unpatterned area at the beginning and ending of each strip of trim that we knitted correctly positioned to get caught in the seam and finished later. Without thinking, I just hung these stitches on the needles as they were, but it's actually easier to start with the needles pushed back as they are now. Reach through, grab the needles, and flip that bar or pair of bars. As you can see, you can do it 2 at a time. Flip it right onto the bed. Here's a chart that shows you the number of needles that should get a bar hung upon them. You are on page 5 of the written pattern if you're following along there. The line divides 2 sets of sizes. So the very top row is showing sizes 32, 4, 6, 8, 40, and 42 finished hip, and the number just below the size is the number of stitches that should be cast on by hanging trim on them. To continue with the example of knitting a sweater with a 36-inch finished hip, we should be casting on 101 stitches by means of hanging that trim along its edge. I need to make you aware of a couple of things before we go. One is just a reminder. You already know that we're going to need some provision for using weights with the ribber. So if you do not have suitable combs as described in the previous movies, be sure you cast on in waste yarn and knit in a row of ravel cord before doing this step. That way you will be able to hang the ribber comb and weights in the waste yarn. The other thing to take note of, if for some reason you decide to use fewer or more needles than I'm using, such as maybe you want to slightly tweak and get an in-between size, that is okay, but you must use an odd number, otherwise the later parts of the pattern won't work out well.